And while I do that, I'm gonna live stream us to Facebook.
How's my sound?
Sound is good. Sound is perfect. Let's see where we are. It's preparing to live stream. Let me just check in the background that everything is in order.
Yeah, that's cool. I see it's linked into Facebook. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Welcome everyone to the second episode of Mabili's podcast that we've started, our live webinar
This is the
podcast.
second episode. I thought I was the first. What was the first one?
This this is the
You
second.
had.
This is the second. So the first one was actually cracking the code to a successful career, and as a result of that, we're now chatting to you, who's had a very successful career in the developer space. So welcome to all of our listeners. We have Henry Shepherdson, a successful developer. He's one of our expert mentors. He assists on the course front. He's even developing on a number of projects for us. And yeah, welcome everyone. And Henry, great to have you.
Thanks very much, Brendan. Yeah, very good to be here. I always like sharing my story and motivating and helping others. That's definitely one of the things that I've enjoyed the most throughout my career. So yeah, and it's been a pleasure working with Mabili. I've had an absolute ride being a mentor. So yeah, 100%. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. So it has been a ride, hasn't it?
It
So
has.
why don't we start off
Yeah.
just just a general question? Maybe just tell the listeners who you are. Maybe what got you into the tech space? Did you stumble upon it? Have you always been interested in the tech space? Were you a gamer that slipped into the space? Let's hear a little bit about your journey.
Sure, yeah. So I wasn't, I haven't really been a gamer even as I've gotten older. I remember when I just gotten out of school, a couple of years after that, I got into Diablo. I don't know if you
I know it,
know about
yes,
Diablo. You
very
know,
well.
it's one of those open world games, and I remember, I mean, I was still just waitering at the time, so it wasn't too serious. But I remember playing that game. Um, and the one morning, sort of right the way through the night, the next thing I knew, the birds started tweeting. So it was like quite a serious thing. And then I used to love like Age of Empires. I mean, but that was right in the beginning. But aside from that, I wasn't really a gamer. But um, in high school, I was fascinated with computers. I did computer science as an extracurricular activity. And back then, I mean, it was the days, and this is my age now, but I mean, it's when the internet and computers, started really coming out. And if you had a hard drive of 500 megabytes, that was big, with the
Yeah.
Pentiums and that. But yeah, my dad brought home a laptop from work. He was in a company that he'd also actually, he was an entrepreneur as well. And he started a company, and their tech was software, essentially. So they had a group of guys there who were very sort of nerdy like me. So I got to spend time with them. And yeah, so he brought him this laptop for me, and my brother would be going out on a Saturday night with his friends, partying and that. Not me. I was sitting a Saturday night with my laptop, learning how to program in DOS and Turbo Pascal,
You had your
and
priorities
that kind
right.
of thing. Yeah. So yeah, that was my early years. But later on, right before I started, actually, really before I became a web developer, I did a course. This is around 2008, the year during 2008. I did that course, the CELTA course, which is the Cambridge English Language Teaching to Adults. And I'll tell you how this links now. And I really enjoyed the teaching side. I enjoyed standing in front of a classroom, presenting content. Like at first it was nerve-wracking. When we did the course, they put us in front of like real life students on day one, and it was terrifying. But after you did maybe 4 or 5 sessions, it actually, once the fear lifted, it was absolute bliss. I really enjoyed it. I love connecting with people. I love, having the structured information and content and delivering it. And that engagement for me is really what excites me. But I found that the subject of English wasn't really that interesting to me, but I did like the teaching side. So 2008, 2009, then I decided that I wanted to become an IT trainer, but I didn't really have any IT skills, for the modern world, aside from what I do. I've always known and been interested in the basics of computing and that, but from a web development perspective, I had no idea how to even build a website. So in order to become an IT trainer, I would obviously have to go the route of becoming a web developer first, getting proficient, and then working my way to where I could stand in front and actually teach it. So at that point as well, I've always loved music, and I made the decision between the two. I was either going to do a sound engineering course, or I was going to go the web development route. And I ended up going the web development route. The sound engineering side, it was just something that was an interest for me. But yeah, anyway, it didn't become anything professional. So I started in 2010 on the 1st of May. That was officially the day when I started.
Okay.
And I had no clue how to even build a website, like I said. And back then I used a software called Dreamweaver. So it's one of Adobe's software. And if you've been around for a while, I think the software is available, but it's changed name now. They're calling it something else. But what I loved about Dreamweaver was that you could create a new project, and it would basically scaffold a blank web page for you, and you could select what layout you want. So you could have a page with a header and a footer and a single column, or you could have a left sidebar or right sidebar, and it would create all the HTML, and then you could immediately start, creating a website for yourself from that. So it would mean that I wouldn't have to, every time I wanted to create a new project, have to know all like the fundamentals about HTML. I could get straight into it, which I find is great because it's motivating. You don't have to always get stuck in the dirt every time you want to start a project. You can just get going and really, and that's the exciting thing. I remember the very first time I registered with a host company. Back then it was Hetzner. They're now called Xnilo. I bought my first domain and created my first host package, and then uploaded my first, little website project with a couple of HTML pages, uploaded it. And there it came up on this domain, and it was live for the world, and I mean, it's so basic now, but it was incredible. And if you're a developer and you get excited about those kinds of things, then you're on the right track, 100%.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
that was my first experience. And I think for me, it's something I've always been passionate about. It's something I've always been excited about. I mean, now nearly 15 years later, I'm in my dream job. Where I am now, I'm working for myself. I'm in my dream job. I've got excellent clients. I've got an excellent work-life balance. I mean, I keep my life quite minimal, and, I run lean. But for me, my priority is not working 18 hours a day to build an empire and just be rich, like I like the work-life balance, but I've done all right anyway, But back initially in the first few years, what I really wanted was to be able to get into a company where I could get some guidance, working for free, being a junior, shadowing someone. But I just didn't find any opportunities like that. So I kept on coming back to just freelancing, working for myself. And initially what I was doing was just reaching out to anyone and everyone that I knew, and any project that I could do just to get the experience. I mean, I was charging like 500 Rand, 1,000 Rand, 1,500 Rand, for websites, because I was learning and I just wanted to get the practice. And so I mean, back then I was just building your basic. I was working with PHP right from the beginning, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, in its most basic format. And I would say I was doing that for the first couple of years. And then I found the CMSs, the content management systems. The one I started off first with was a CMS called Drupal. So it's quite similar to WordPress. But obviously WordPress is the much more popular platform. But anyway, I just happened to find Drupal first. I was looking at CMSs in general to find one that I liked. And the reason for that is because of the rapid development. So you can get one of these CMSs up in 5 to 10 minutes, and you've got a little website, and loading content's easy, all of that. It's easy to hand over to clients and that. So I started off, I was working with Drupal for maybe a couple of weeks. Then I jumped over to WordPress, and I really liked WordPress. And then I actually I marketed myself as a WordPress developer. So, and I did really well. I mean, I was doing that for a few years. I mean, this now is taking us up to about 2015, 2014, 2015. And I was doing really well, and I had a few clients, but when I was saying I was doing well, like I was still enjoying the process. I was like learning a lot, but the income wasn't great. I mean, for years I was eating jungle oats for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Sounds like a
But I
student
think,
lifestyle.
yeah, it was a student lifestyle. I mean, because I wasn't studying at university, but I was self-taught my whole way through. So I was just learning as I was going. So yeah, definitely the student lifestyle. And yeah, so I got going with WordPress. But yeah, so the thing I wanted to say was that for me, my philosophy has never been, like I said, I never had this big goal to get rich and build this empire. I just loved the process. And I think for me, that has been one of my strengths, and one of the things that has actually been, helped me to get through all of those years where the money wasn't there, where I didn't have a proper business. I was just winging it. I didn't have guidance. I just take, step by step, day by day. But the fact that I really enjoyed the web development and I found it exciting, I was interested, curious about everything. I was excited to sit down and always learn something new. That's what pulled me through. And like I said in the beginning, if just putting up your first web page on a domain excites you, that's a good start already, because that's what's going to carry you through at the end of the day, is being passionate about what you do. If you're doing something that you're passionate about, you can carry on for years, and you'll come right in the end. So yeah, I was doing the WordPress. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. So I was just going to say exactly. And then just, I mean, without interrupting you, you spoke of your earlier projects. Now, in contrast to your projects today, I mean, they must be significantly different.
Yeah. So, for example, a project that I just did from the ground up before I started with WordPress, I remember it was a little website that needed to have a list of books displayed on the front. It was for an organization, a non-profit organization, and they had a mini shop on the side where you could find the books that you needed and order it and that kind of thing. And it was a very basic PHP script connecting to a MySQL database at the back end. Very rudimentary, being able to add books as an admin and log in and that kind of thing. So what we find is that most web applications, no matter how complicated they are, is really just a CRUD model. Create, read, update, delete. And by model, I mean data, a piece of data. So a data can be a book. So create a book, read, view the details of that book, update the information on that book, or delete that record. So if you've got the fundamentals of that and you understand it, any application we work with today is that. I mean, obviously more complex applications have relational databases and they have a lot more models in it, but that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. So And then shifting into WordPress, it's pretty much the same model. You know, WordPress is based on a post. Everything is an evolution of a post. So your basic model in WordPress is the post, which is your blog post. And I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but WordPress started off just as a blogging platform like Blogger, or, you know, one of the many ones that are out there. So
Yeah.
all it was there for was to present articles that authors would publish, you know, writers. So it wasn't meant to be like a full-on corporate websites building tool. It evolved into that. But the benefit of that is that this is the reason that WordPress is such a very well SEO, on-site SEO structured system, because it's all around the content at the end of the day. So a page is just a type of posts. An author, or the author is linked to the post or owns the post. And then you've got categories and tags, which then is a way to group your posts and pages if you want. So it's all linked, and it's very well structured. So that's the way that WordPress is set up, and is very good. Anyway, I digress. So
it's just to jump in. It's like the story
yeah.
of Discord. Discord started as a gamers platform just to chat and talk about gaming.
Yeah.
Now it's one of the biggest communication tools. Still very much in the gamers, but there's groups you can talk about anything, developer content, new things coming about. So it's very interesting how these tools develop over time.
Absolutely. And what's just come up for me, I've just been actually right before this, I've just been chatting to a client of mine, and we're essentially still in startup phase. And we're trying to, you know, we've got this great product, but the concept is very new in the market. And we're trying to find how to get traction on this. And it's just figuring out, you know, what it is, and it's just getting into market and actually testing it in the market and getting feedback and finding out what actually the market wants, because it's just a guess otherwise. And once you've got it into market, that's great, because then you can make really, you know, constructive decisions in terms of how you pivot. And this is the thing. So any application that we build, we just got to get it to market as quickly as possible and see where it goes, and just be a very adaptable to change. And exactly, just like WordPress has done, just like Discord has done, the products evolve on their own, you know, aside from what we can imagine them to be. So that's also something very good to keep in mind when building and planning applications.
And speaking of projects that you're building and planning now,
Yeah.
what programming languages do you what tools and programming languages do you specialize in?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that actually links in with the timeline. So while I was doing WordPress, I started to get into custom plugin development. And through that, in order to get into custom plugin development, you start getting exposed to more and more PHP and JavaScript, but mostly PHP. So then getting into the PHP, then I started really enjoying and getting the hang of PHP as a language, because when you just site building, you know, in WordPress, you don't need to touch code. But when you get into the custom stuff, then you actually get into the coding side of it. So that's when I first got exposed to PHP itself. And then from that, I realized I needed to find a tool that didn't have the restriction of WordPress. So WordPress is great because, like I said, it's good for rapid development, but it has a ceiling to what you can do with it. So I was specializing in WordPress. I was a WordPress developer, but the problem is that to a hammer, everything's a nail. And to a WordPress developer, every project you just use WordPress. So I was hitting these issues with projects where they were way more complicated, and there's this transition that happens where WordPress is great to a point, but then when you've got more complicated applications, then it just becomes, sure, WordPress as a start, but then you start hacking WordPress, and the system becomes very messy and unstable. And so at that point, I realized I needed to find, I still wanted the rapid development, but I also wanted the power and the extensibility of a system. So that's where we get into now is PHP frameworks. And what I got into from there was a framework called Laravel, which is a PHP framework. And I've been working with Laravel on and off. I mean, in the beginning, not so much, but definitely for the last few years, but probably from around 2018, I started looking into these kinds of frameworks and then specializing in Laravel. So that was the PHP side. And I was working solidly with Laravel as a framework. What are we now? 2024, probably up until last year, the beginning of last year. And through Laravel as well, Laravel exposed me to then JavaScript. So it's quite interesting, this pattern. So it's like a sequence of events where
Yes.
starting off with web applications, then PHP, then WordPress, then getting exposed to, you know, the PHP as a language, and then looking at the framework, and then the framework exposed me to the JavaScript side. And I don't just mean your vanilla JavaScript, I mean your JavaScript frameworks. So what I started using, and the reason for it is it actually comes built into the Laravel framework in their later editions. So PHP forms the backend in a Laravel application, and then the JavaScript framework forms the front end to give you that, you know, that really slick, smooth, you know, mobile app experience.
That's
Where the page
exactly what's
transitions
going
are
to
smooth.
help a very novice listener out there understand actually how a website is built. You've got your front end, your back end, and these are the languages that
Absolutely.
come together to form them.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, on that note, so Laravel follows the MVC model, which is model view controller. So what you've got, the model means data, and the model is basically the database. And then the view is the front end. So you've got the back end and the front end. But what sits between the back end and the front end is your logic. And the logic is still, it actually is part of the back end, essentially. So if you're a back end development, it's still the code. And then the front end developer will take whatever's the output, the data that's output, once it's all been calculated and logicked, out to the front end, and they build out like the React, you know, front end or framework. So yes, absolutely. And then you get different types of structures, but I guess, you know, if you want to standardize it, yeah, there's the back end, which is the database, and then the front end, which is the user interface that people see, and then you've got the logic, and the logic talks to the database and pulls and manipulates and presents that data just as data to the front end, and then the front end is responsible for presenting it as the presentation layer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so from there, and I've, you know, it's obvious to me that where we are now is JavaScript, in terms of web application development. So for just over a year now, I've been working with, you know, playing around with JavaScript applications. Well, actually say probably about 2 years, starting off with Vue.js. So
Okay.
Vue.js
Would you say it was difficult to get into those working with JavaScript?
Yeah, and like there's always a learning curve, and with the learning curve, it's always a balance of realizing that we got limited time and energy. Actually, you know, the passion runs out at 8 o'clock at night sometimes. So you've got to be realistic, and this brings me to another point, and you know, something that maybe others can learn from my experience is that being someone who's so excited about trying new tech, I'm an early adopter, or I used to be a very much an early adopter. An early adopter means anyone who will take on and engage and use products the moment they're released. And anytime a new update is out, we're the ones who are excited to get the update, to try and, you know, play with it, and because we're just excited about seeing what the new tech is. So having this excitement, what I was doing with my projects is, and what you should do in hindsight is, any new project you take on should be about an 80% to 20% ratio of production versus research. So whereas on some projects, the ratio I had it was 20% production and 80% research. And what I mean by production and research is that production is the area where I'm doing the work, building it out based on tech and methodologies that I'm already comfortable with and I've got experience with. So I don't need to do a lot of Googling and looking up and figuring out in terms of making it work. Whereas the 20% is the research side, where it's a brand new technology, brand new aspect to whatever I'm using. I'm extending my knowledge, but what that means is I'm spending time doing the research in order to use it in a production application. So when you're building these on the fly, you can get away with the 20% because it kind of builds into the whole time frame of the project. But when I was doing 80% research, I would start some project, like big serious projects on technologies I'd never touched before.
That
There's a
must have been
fine line
daunting.
between bravery and stupidity, right? But
Exactly.
so yeah, I got myself into hot water a few times, but these are lessons learned. Yeah, these are lessons learned. So yeah, but I think it's also important not to go the other way. Don't go 100% production, because you're just going to get bored and you're not challenging yourself. For me, I like to have that 20% because it means that I'm always learning and growing, with each new project, and keeping exciting and keeping up to date with things. So yeah, of course, there's definitely a learning curve, and you've just got to also, whatever you're investing your time and energy into, you've just got to say to yourself, how is this going to help me in the long run? Is it going to make my life easier? Is this technology worth learning? As developers, we've got to be very aware as far as possible as to what is going on in the world of technology. It's good to just keep in touch with communities. And it's good to, like, even TikTok, I know that scrolling and all of that has got a bad reputation, but I pick up a lot of tips just before I go to bed. Yes, 10 minutes before I go to bed, I'm on my phone. So but I get to sleep eventually. But I can just be scrolling, and then you've got a lot of people who come up and they present. Like, a lot of the channels have just like, what's the latest in tech, what's the latest tools, and I'll pick it up, and then I'll send myself a little bookmark via email, and then I'll follow it up the next morning. But we've always just got to be in tune with what the latest technologies are, and all of that. And like I said, the summary of it is, take the learning curve, but it's an investment.
Exactly.
And the more languages you learn, and the more time you spend with technology, and the more time you spend sitting and figuring stuff out, that's even a skill. The ability to figure things out, the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, the ability to adopt new technologies, the ability to unlearn and relearn. Those are all skills. And the more time you spend doing that, the learning curves become easier, and they actually become pleasant at a point. So yeah.
That speaks into this idea of lifelong learning. We all know that skills are not static. They're ever evolving. The programming languages are changing as the times change, and there's massive AI is becoming a part of our daily lives. What's next on your agenda? What programming language are you looking into learning, and why?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what I'm spending the most time with at the moment is Next.js. And Next.js is a React framework. And in fact, if you go to the React site now, you will find them recommending learning there are a few React frameworks that they've got as official recommended partner frameworks on their site. Because React itself is just a components framework. It doesn't, by itself, you can't easily build an actual website with a backend and all of that. So with Next.js, that creates all the infrastructure of a web application. And then you've also got React Native as well. And React Native is a cross-platform development framework for building mobile apps as well as desktop applications and web and everything all in one. So you basically have one code base, and you deploy to iOS, to Android, to your web, to desktop, whatever you want. So I'm finding JavaScript essentially high level, focusing on JavaScript. And then I've chosen React and Next.js as what I'm focusing on at the moment.
Very cool. And for any young individual who's looking to get into programming and coding, what advice would you give them in terms of which language should they learn first? I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were saying that Python, if you are interested in AI, Python is the language of AI, and that's where what you need to get. And it's actually a simple language. It's not hard. You can understand it. It's not complex. But what are your thoughts?
It does depend on what your goals are. So just like any education model, you start off in a generalized syllabus, and then you specialize as you go in. So I would 100% say do like Udemy is also a great platform. I know Mabili's an even better platform.
Exactly. Definitely.
Do any general full stack web developer course, because you don't actually know what's going to pull you until you've had a little taste of everything. So that's what I would suggest. So Python, yeah, for sure. So there's different kinds of there's different angles to AI. I would say Python is more important if you're going to be working with actual data science and machine learning models, like actually developing the machine learning models that are going to be used in applications. If you're going to be doing AI, like using existing models, using like the ChatGPT Open AI model to integrate to make your applications AI powered or intelligent, then you don't necessarily need to use Python, because you're accessing it, from through your website, which can be, like we've said, PHP, Node.js, which is what Next, the JavaScript frameworks run on. So yeah, so basically it just depends where you want to specialize, but start off with a generalized full stack course. To get going, do a year's course, 6 months to a year, and then make a decision from there. But Python, yeah, 100%. And I don't think Python's going away anytime soon. Of course, it's definitely not. I mean, Python's differentiator is its large capacity to seamlessly and concurrently run numbers and arrays and dealing with data. That's where Python is strong. So this is the reason why Python is so good in the data science field and in the machine learning field, is because of the large amounts of data that it can process if a lot more efficiently and a lot more quickly than other languages.
Interesting. Awesome. Thank you for your insightful journey, Henry. It's been really great to listen to you and hear how you evolved from your early days at the start to where you are now. I just want to end off with maybe some quick fire, rapid fire questions, just to see what your thoughts are. And let's start off. What's your code editor of choice?
My code editor of choice is currently Cursor. So, and Cursor is based on Visual Studio Code, and I've switched to Cursor just a few weeks ago. Visual Studio Code was my primary IDE. Cursor is basically Visual Studio Code with embedded AI ChatGPT functionality, and you can select what chat model you want to use. So essentially, you can, in your code editor, you've got a chat on the right hand side, and you've got your code on the left, and you ask it questions, you ask it to generate code, and it does it all there integrated. Whereas before, I would go onto a browser and ask ChatGPT, copy paste, work it in. But yeah, at the moment, Cursor.
Fascinating. And next, hybrid, in office or remote?
So I'm currently fully remote. I stay in Durban in Hillcrest. It's a beautiful countryside area. But what I would love is actually to find a beautiful co-working space down the road. Yes. I have worked in co-working spaces before, and it's really great just to get out of your head a little bit. So maybe 1 or 2 days a week, that would be perfect. But at the moment, I'm fully remote.
Very cool. And then lastly, what's your favorite programming language?
Wow.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. I tell you what, like one of a course that I'm doing at the moment is a creative coding course in JavaScript where you can actually create geometric patterns and animations and kind of things. And just for adding that engagement on the front end and the interactivity and the fact that you can use it to build a full stack web application, and just what, because it's what I'm focusing on the moment, I would say hands down JavaScript.
Okay, epic. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Henry. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Keep an eye on our page for next week's webinar podcast and see who we'll be chatting to next. And have a great Wednesday. Cheers.
Thanks, Brendan.